You've probably heard me and others mention the Malthusian death cult, haven't you? Well, it all traces back to this guy. His theories laid the grim foundation for a cascade of malevolent agendas. The Club of Rome, with its foreboding Limits to Growth manifesto in 1972, penned by elitists like Aurelio Pesci and Alexander King, bankrolled by the Rockefellers, mind you. They prophesized resource collapse and societal ruin, and then that transformed into Agenda 21, and later, Agenda 2030. Cloaked in sustainable development, yet steeped in control and political power. Yeah. From the halls of the UK royal family to the calculated US political elite, and every scheming figure whispering at Davos, the global aristocracy clings to this doctrine of desolation. Every one of their most diabolical plans, from population control to manufactured crises, open borders, and the erosion of sovereignty. Truth be told, it all springs from this dark well of Malthusian thought. Woven into the very fabric of every establishment political initiative, this theory casts a large shadow and threatens our very existence. Now some might call that fear-mongering, but with their focal point being that we need to get rid of a couple billion people, well, I don't think it's a stretch for me to say that, alright? Anyway, Thomas Malthus was an English economist born in 1766. His most infamous work, an essay on the principles of population, came out in 1798. It introduced a grim theory that would reverberate throughout the centuries. Population growth, if unchecked, would inevitably outstrip the Earth's finite resources, plunging mankind into an abyss of famine, disease, and despair. Malthus argued that population increases geometrically, doubling and redoubling in a relentless march, while food production grows only arithmetically, a slow crawl. This imbalance, he warned, would trigger positive checks, like starvation and war. Yeah, positive checks, like starvation and war, or preventative checks like delayed marriage and abstinence. But he did not stop there. He also claimed that it would lead to cruelty, barbarism, and inhumane acts from the masses, eating each other, as a turn of phrase, which would bring the world's population back to sustainable levels. And you see people in today's version of the Club of Rome use the same exact talking points as Thomas Malthus, hundreds of years later.
But in one way or another, we are so far, globally, we are so far above the population and the consumption levels which can be supported by this planet that I know in one way or another it's going to come back down. So I don't hope to avoid that. I hope that it can occur in a civil way, and I mean civil in a special way, peaceful. Peace doesn't mean that everybody's happy, but it means that conflict isn't solved through violence, through force, but rather in other ways. And so that's what I hope for. That we can, the planet can support something like 1 billion people, maybe 2 billion, depending on how much liberty and how much material consumption you want to have. If you want more liberty and more consumption, you have to have fewer people.
And so Thomas Malthus's viewpoint was a world governed by a cold mathematical inevitability, where nature itself would act as the reaper. He drew inspiration from a mix of Enlightenment rationality and the stark realities of his time. You see, the late 18th century was a period of booming populations, enclosures of common land, and early industrial revolutions. Conditions that seemed to foreshadow the resource crisis he predicted. A cleric by training, his ideas had a moralistic tinge, suggesting that the poor, with their supposed reckless breeding, were complicit in their own suffering. Critics of his day accused him of heartlessness, yet his theories took root, influencing economists like David Ricardo and even Charles Darwin, whose theory of natural selection owes a quiet debt to the Malthusian struggle. However, if you fast forward to today, the specter of Malthusian politics looms larger than ever, as they claim our world is straining under the weight of 8 billion souls.
So in the session we just attended here at the Economic Forum, I think there was a sense of relief, actually, in your frankness. You brought up some issues that others are reluctant to bring up.
Always. All the religious groups are against me because I'm talking about population. They want more souls. I want less on the planet.
And so the term Malthusian now evokes a worldview steeped in dread, the belief that humanity teeters on the brink of collapse as population pressures clash with dwindling resources. It's a narrative that thrives in an era of climate chaos. Or so they want you to believe, because I don't subscribe to that viewpoint, as you all know. The point, though, is that Malthus's theory didn't fade. It morphed into today's green agenda. It's true, the pulse of Malthus beats in the rise of eco-fascist rhetoric, where some whisper that only culling the herd can save the planet. And in their sterile calculus, policymakers weigh human lives against carbon budgets. Population versus resource scarcity remains the heart of this modern Malthusian nightmare. The United Nations projects a global population nearing 10 billion by 2050, while the World Resource Institute warns that food demand could outstrip supply by 60% in that same span. They claim oil reserves are dwindling, rare earth minerals are vanishing to the tech-hungry, and the Amazon, the lungs of the earth, choke under the axe. In fact, just as something crazy to show you, check out this post from Josh Welkos. A new 4-lane highway is being built that cuts through tens of thousands of acres of protected Amazon rainforest for the COP30 Climate Summit. Yeah, they're cutting down the rainforest to make way for a climate summit. You couldn't make that up if you tried. It's so crazy, I don't even know what to say really. You have some irony, some hypocrisy, some idiocy, and a superiority complex all residing on different levels of that shit show. Anyway, Malthusian politics today cloaks itself in green virtue, with thinkers and activists arguing that overpopulation is the root of ecological ruin. Some point to Africa's soaring birth rates or Asia's booming cities as harbingers of doom, reviving Malthus's old specter of the undeserving poor who multiply beyond Earth's capacity. Yet the real ominous twist lies in the solutions whispered in the corners of events like Davos. Where Thomas Malthus once saw nature as the executioner, today's Malthusians, whether technocrats or just run-of-the-mill political extremists, well, they sometimes hint at human hands taking up the task. From eugenics to forced sterilization and population control policies, well, they rear their ugly head in establishment circles, while even the mainstream voices ask, who gets to survive when the resources run dry? The irony is bitter. Malthus himself underestimated human ingenuity and technological leaps that have so far staved off his apocalypse. But that right there isn't stopping these politicians who clamor for mass death. They preach the climate tipping point is coming, changing their timeline as they see fit, and it's almost as if it's not about resources at all, or climate change, and it's all just another manipulation. And it kind of sounds like that because that's exactly what it is. Whatever the case, the architects of society seem unbothered and undeterred. To them, the ledger remains unbalanced. They view it as a numbers game, where human life is just a bullet point. Malthusian politics isn't just a theory, it's in practice. We see it every single day. But to me, it only acts as more of an excuse for some of the elite's darkest desires than anything else. Now, whatever the truth is, I'm not even sure if it matters, because they're continuously moving forward to reducing carbon, even if that carbon is you.